You're listening to the Sacred Mama Podcast. I'm your host, Käri, aka the Sacred Mama. I'm a mindset and relationship coach, helping mothers nurture the relationship between themselves, their spouse, and their children. This is also sometimes inside of a co-parenting relationship. This podcast was designed specifically for mothers, stepmothers, and soon-to-be mothers to come together and truly support one another, to have the real, raw, honest, unfiltered, and soulful conversations about the realities of motherhood. My goal is for mothers to reclaim their self-worth and reclaim their self-identity while navigating motherhood. It's time you treated yourself as a priority because most of all, you matter. I believe that you can have the thriving family life. I believe that you can have the booming business. And I believe that you can have the passionate and abundant relationship. Most of all, I believe you can fully love yourself in the now without sacrifice. Throughout this podcast, you'll gain access to the minds of industry leaders and of course solo episodes by yours truly. So, let's dive in. Hey guys, welcome to an episode of the Sacred Mama Podcast. So today I would like to introduce Käri Hurd as our guest this week. So I just want to do a quick introduction here. So Käri is a proud single mom to two beautiful teenage girls, and she has spent years creating an image of a life that was quote unquote normal as possible and did everything she could to make sure it didn't feel as her kids lived in a single parent home. And it cost her every ounce of energy. So now she's using the lessons she's learned to help other moms face their stories and fears so they can live their most authentic self and be the mom that they want to be, not the mom they feel they need to be. So welcome, Käri. How are you?
Well, thank you. I'm good. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm happy to have you here, and especially because these are the first couple interviews of, the Sacred Mom podcast. So the shift, the change. Yes.
All the
and
shifts.
So we will have, this conversation is going to be good, guys. Today we're going to be talking about, lessons we've learned as mothers. We're going to talk about non-negotiables. The biggest thing we're going to talk about today has to do with co-parenting. And so this is a topic that both Käri and I are familiar with. And so let's dive right in. So is there anything first you'd like to say before we dive into these questions?
I don't think so. I'm just super excited because I love talking to other moms about mom stuff.
Yes.
And I know a lot of moms say that, but I know just because I follow you on social media and we've chatted a little bit, and it's different when you're having conversations like this, I think, than when you're sitting around with your girlfriends talking about, the day-to-day mom stuff. But to dig in and have these conversations, nobody does this. Nobody does this.
And this is needed, which is why the shift has happened for the podcast. It's why everything is coming this way, is because these conversations, I guess, these unfiltered conversations, these stigma topics need to really be talked about. And there's no shame around talking about motherhood and its deep roots. There's so much that is engulfed into motherhood, and I feel like this is going to be just a great platform and an area to speak about it freely. So I'm happy to have you on here to talk about this.
Awesome.
Okay.
All right, let's go.
I love how both me and you are like, yes, let's do this. Okay. So my first question for you is, I want to talk about lessons. And so what is one of the biggest lessons that you've learned as a mother that you would really love to share with other moms who are listening to this podcast?
Oh, there's so many. I saw that and I was like, I think for me, it's to not take the time with them for granted. Mm-hmm. I think it is so easy. And I know you introduced me, but for those of you listening, my lens is as a single mom. And so you're getting pulled. I mean, every mom is getting pulled 10,000 directions all the time. Right. But it was really easy for me when they were little to and I even hate to say the words because it makes me sad to think about, but almost wish away time a little bit. You're wishing I wish that they were a little more independent so that I could do X, Y, Z without having to supervise them 24/7. Or I wish they could cook their own dinner so I didn't have to think about that every single day. And I spent so much energy, and I know all the moms listening, do you spend so much energy thinking about what if I didn't have to do all the things I have to do as a mom, rather than looking at it as a gift, and really just knowing that a lot of the things as moms that we're stressing about are not the important things. And we're wasting our energy on those things rather than loving on those beautiful humans that we have.
A freaking man is actually what I want to say to that. Especially, I think every mom would relate to what you just said in regards to, you know, wishing away time, and not even intentionally. And I feel like when we're wishing away time, and we can talk about this too, and I've known that when I've wished away time or I've wanted things to be, you know, quicker, is when there's been like a lack of boundary for myself, or a lack of self-care, and a lack of, you know, putting myself first and thinking that they always had to come first. And therefore, when I was feeling overwhelmed and depleted, I was trying to say, oh my gosh, I can't wait until they go to bed, or oh my goodness, I can't wait until this time is over. And honestly, just a couple days ago, I had probably one of the most overwhelming days I've had since our youngest was born. And I did exactly that. And then I felt extremely guilty about it. And so it's, you know, I think every mom needs to give themselves a break too, if they've done that. But I think that that's, you know, a beautiful thing to remember, is that there's so much gratitude for the time that we have with our children and how young they are. You know, I even read, there was an article that was shared today about the different points of views of how a child sees something versus how a parent does. So if a child drops like a cake on the floor and the parent is like, no, the child actually sees it as like enjoyment or a game or something that's very different. So it's a completely different perspective. And it's just the acknowledgement of that. And so I like that. Thank you very much for sharing that, because I think that's something important to talk about. And we can almost do like a roundabout about that after, because I think we should touch on boundaries after.
Boundaries.
Yes, boundaries and that self-care game. Okay, so I have another question for you. What is something that is a non-negotiable for you, Käri, as a mom?
I think I always put the disclaimer, I don't know if my kids would see this, but for me, it's always that we never leave a conversation unfinished. And I don't necessarily know, my girls are pretty good friends. I don't know how they handle their interpersonal, if they have issues now, because they kind of keep it between the two of them. That's always been a thing, even for me, even since they were little, is that if there was tensions between anybody, or we were fighting, or there was just, you know, things going down, I always, and maybe subconsciously, I don't even know if I was doing it intentionally, but like, it was always really important to me that there was resolution. And even if we weren't always happy with the resolution, it was where we could get to we're going to agree to disagree, but are we okay? And making sure that our relationships in our home, because it's really just been the three of us for the better part of the last 15 years. And so it just making sure that the three of us were a team and had that relationship was so important to me that I actually, this so, well, not funny, but literally just a week or two ago. So my oldest has recently moved out. It's just my youngest and I now in the house. And she was having a high anxiety day, and I was having a high stress day. And she said something that triggered me, and then I said something back that triggered her. And we literally both just went to bed without talking. And it was so impactful to me, because I noted it as like, that's the first time I think that that's ever happened in this house. In, 18 years of being a mom, that is the first time I think that that's ever happened. I usually almost always go in to resolve it before bed, and neither of us did. We just went to bed. And I hated it.
Well, as much as you hated that, I think that there's also, I think everything happens for a reason. That's just kind of a belief that I have, and that there's always a lesson to be learned. And I also believe that sometimes, I'm a person who very much wants resolve, who wants to make sure that if there's a problem, I want to be able to fix it and go to bed feeling that everything is a-okay.
Mm-hmm.
I've had to learn that I cannot control other people's actions or what they do. And so
Right.
sometimes somebody else might actually need some space before they can actually come and have a conversation that is
Yep.
productive instead of argumentative. And
Yep.
so was there anything like, how did you feel in the morning, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I have to be honest. I think in that moment, I was probably the one that needed the space, which is unusual because, like you said, I'm
Mhm.
usually the one that goes and seeks resolution.
Yeah.
But she and I don't see each other in the morning because of schedules. But when we came back together at night, she got home from school, and I could tell she was in a much better mood. And I just said, "Are we okay?" And she had texted throughout the day and was like, "I'm sorry. I wasn't really upset about what I was upset about. There was just some stuff bugging me." And like, we just sort of both acknowledged that we weren't upset with each other. We were just in
Yep.
that sort of high anxiety space.
Yes.
So,
And more can happen and more can be triggered inside of a high anxiety
uh-huh.
space.
Huge.
Yes. And, I've
Yeah.
learned so much about my children and about how they respond to, myself or situations that are
Mhm.
happening to them. My stepson is much more emotional and responds very emotionally versus my stepdaughter. And then also, then you have a toddler and then a newborn, and like they all respond very differently to everything. Like a newborn doesn't really know what's going on in the world.
Right.
So they rely on you. But I think, that whole resolution is a beautiful piece, and that's like a non-negotiable for you, and it has
Yeah.
been, is to have that resolution and to make sure that those relationships are, grounded and put together. And I think that's beautiful, because I think that's one of the biggest fears that I've had, is that at one point I might not have those relationships with my children. And I
Right.
never want that to happen. I know that I have to give them space to breathe, to learn, to grow. But I'm also terrified that
Hmm.
of the moment of one time my children not actually needing me. I've said to,
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead. I think you're going to say
No, I
something.
was just gonna say, because like I said, fostering that relationship with them has been my priority number one.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you and your listeners, if you work on that 100%, my 18-year-old just recently moved out, and she makes an effort to stop home every Tuesday after her class gets done just to hang out. Like, she still, or in when she sees me, if she's had a hard day, or she'll just text me and she'll be like, "Mom, I just need a mom hug." Like, and I feel like because I spent all that, well, that didn't even cost me any energy. I shouldn't even say that. How do I word that? But because that was a focus for me and because that was a priority for me, I
Yeah.
think that has paid off now. And that, no, she doesn't need me in a lot of the same ways she used to need me,
Mm-hmm.
but she still knows that I'm here, you know?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And I have a very close relationship with both. I'm gonna slowly start going into the
Yeah.
whole
Yeah.
co-parenting thing too. But
Yes.
I come from divorced parents.
Hmm. Me
They
too.
divorced when I was 5, and so they have a great relationship now, which is incredible. And I know that there's a lot of parents and a lot of families that don't have that.
Hmm.
And I'm grateful that I was able to experience that, because my parents showed me that there is possibility to have those really thriving relationships even after it's been dissolved.
Hmm.
But I have a very strong relationship with my mother, where I talk to her every single day. There is
Wow.
not a day. Oh yeah, every day. I FaceTime with my mother every day. Maybe not the weekends,
Yeah.
but I do. I definitely try to. It just depends on
Yeah.
what we're doing. But I spend a lot of time with my mom, and we do a lot of business stuff together. And so we've had to learn how to like jive with our relationship, because we do spend so much time with one another, and because I have grown. So there is a point where I don't need my mother as I used to. And so she even
Hmm.
says like she still shifted through those things as well, where, even as an adult, she said there isn't a day that doesn't go by that I don't worry about you or worry what you're doing or how you're thriving and what's happening. And my mom said to me, she's like, you will always feel this for your children too. She's like, no
Hmm.
matter what, you will always wonder what they're doing, if they're doing okay, if they're supported. And I was like, oh gosh, I love to know
I
things. And so
know.
not knowing is going to be
Hmm.
an interesting path to walk through. But
Yeah.
I also have a very strong relationship with my stepmom. And she, both my mom and my stepmom have really shown me how beautiful those two separate relationships can be. But, having those great relationships, the way that I'm going into this conversation through co-parenting is that I didn't always have the best relationship with my stepchildren's mom. And it took a long time for us to build that and to have a relationship. And so not every situation is the same. And so I kind of want to talk about co-parenting with you.
Yeah, for sure.
And so, I want to talk about like the challenges of co-parenting and really what comes up with co-parenting as a mother's view and also as a stepmother's view, because I feel that, both are extremely important and also can be both extremely different. So I think it's important to touch on this. And I know that I've talked about this a few times.
There's so many pieces to that puzzle, I think. I mean,
yes.
know that. I mean, you've lived every part of it, but it's funny that this comes up because I, like, just a couple weeks ago, on one of the days that Elizabeth was home visiting, we got to talking about their dad. And I will preface this. Their dad and I haven't always been super close since we split. But just a couple weeks ago, my oldest said, Mom, just until recently, until I learned a whole bunch, like she learned some facts behind some of the backstory.
Yes.
And she said, until I really learned all of that and started watching things and seeing things, she goes, I would have never known that you guys didn't get along. Which made me feel so good because that was also a goal. We talked about priorities. That was another priority for me, was just that they saw, I never wanted them to see him the way I saw him.
Yes. Yeah.
Which is a little different than the direction you were going, but it was just interesting.
That's
that
okay.
This issue of co-parenting has come up so much recently. I have been obviously the mom. So their dad, I don't know if they're like legally married, but he does have another woman who he has a 5-year-old with.
Okay.
And she and I get along pretty well. I think probably because we share some of our issues with him.
Okay. Yes. Yeah.
So she and I get along really well. And I think the balance for me, because I watched it, my parents are also divorced.
Yeah.
And then the man that my mom married was also divorced. Like, it's this whole big, I always tell people I have this family shrub, not a family tree. Because we've got
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
And I think, and I don't know what your experience has been, so I don't, you can totally call me out on this if you want.
No,
but
it's all good.
The relationships that I've seen where there's been a big, big struggle is when the stepmom tries too hard too soon to establish her role as the other mom.
Ooh, I like this. Okay.
Like, I feel like there's a balance, right? Because you as the stepmom, and because I did this too. I was in another long-term relationship. We didn't get married, but he had a daughter. Yeah. And I was trying to create this, for lack of a better term, this Brady blended family. And I tried so hard, so fast that it just blew up in my face. Because her dad, the guy I was dating, was like, no, she's my kid and you don't get to, there's all of that. And so I think there's like this fine line of creating this new family that you want to have, and yet at the same time kind of knowing what the boundaries and the limits are as you move forward. And I think that's what you're getting at, is that there's got to be that relationship and that conversation amongst all of the parents. Like, what is your role as the stepmom? What is my role as the, or whatever, like, what's everybody's job here?
Well, and so I love that you brought this up and everything that you said, because I also want to let people know that in this, like, everything you feel, your emotions are completely valid. So whatever you feel is right. Is what you feel is right. Like, we just need to straighten that out before.
Correct.
Because this can be a very triggering topic to some people. And
huge.
I think one of the biggest things is like, I like that you talked about that rushing of those relationships. And yes, maybe there's, some moms that are on here who are listening and who are like, oh yes, I relate, but there could be some stepmoms listening too and saying, oh, maybe I did that. I think at the end of the day, we all try our best. So no matter what, like even myself, like if I go back all the way to the beginning, it was very much of like a tiptoe kind of relationship because I didn't want to overstep my bounds. And
Right.
I also, from the moment that I got into the relationship with my husband, I knew that, my name was Kara. I wasn't in there to take someone's place. And I knew that these children had a mom who loved them dearly. And so, and I think I knew that. And I knew that boundary there for myself, though, not a boundary that was created by their mom, but from my own, was because of the relationship that I saw with my mom and my stepmom, and how there was my stepmom, she was Candace, and she was a mother figure. She was a parent, and she had responsibilities, and she was important, and she was valued and heard. But also there was my mom, and that could never be taken away. And, that was the same thing with my dad, is that I also have a stepfather. And so my stepfather really struggled with that relationship of me having a father. And therefore him and my father didn't end up having a beautiful relationship because there was this constant, like, miscommunication. And so I've always done my best, because I think that's also a fear that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like this is also a fear that moms also have when another woman comes into the picture, is they feel at some point this, this other woman is going to somehow diminish that beautiful relationship that they have. And I really hope moms who are listening to this and who are in a co-parenting relationship, is we are not here to destroy your relationship with your children.
Right.
We're not. Right. And you're like, I've had to say to, my stepchildren's mom, is that your relationship is your relationship, and it gets to be yours, and it gets to be this beautiful relationship. And there is never a point that I would be able to replace that, because that is a solid and grounded relationship. And this is something I've had to repeat a few times, because I feel there was like a lack of, sometimes there's a lack of confidence and worry, just dependent on situations. But I really feel that it needs to be talked about, how, like, stepmoms or, another woman that comes into the picture, they are not there to take your place. Now, there could be, the spectrum of the relationships where there is someone who is doing that. But I feel like there's a large portion of, moms and stepmoms who are not doing that. Right. And who just really desire those thriving relationships between one another. Because at the end of the day, I even said to, my husband many times, and even to these children, because I knew that they struggled with that as well. And like, what to classify me as, what I was, and, was I here to stay? Was I here to go? Like, it was also confusing for them, but I always reassured them to let them know that, you have a mom, and you get to have that beautiful relationship with her. But I would also love to have a relationship with you. And like, hello, my name's Kara. Right? Like, hello, I'm the person who is in a relationship with your father. And now they know that I'm their stepmom. They call me Kara. I've never expected them to be like, hey, mom. No, I'm Kara.
So funny side story. When my mom got remarried to, it's the man I call my dad. He ended up adopting me or whatever. So when they got married, he had a daughter from his first marriage. And my mom had some huge issues. And we got to a point where she hated being called by her first name. And so we had these like made up, like my stepsister had to call her smom, like stepmom. It was the weirdest thing. And I know it was all based on fears and insecurities. I know that it was the weirdest thing, but like you're saying, I think we need to get to a place where we can assume best intentions.
Yes.
Unless
like someone shows you otherwise.
Right. Right. Like it's 100% based in fear. And I get that. I've been lucky enough that I'll call her their stepmom. Their stepmom has been wonderful, and she is just another female role model in their life.
Yeah.
And she's the mom of their half sister. And,
Mm-hmm.
but I just, and maybe that's like when I was talking about that moving too fast thing, I sometimes wonder if when as stepmoms we do that, when we start moving too quickly, if that accelerates that fear a little bit, because if there's that perception of, oh, look at, she's trying to reestablish a new family with my kids.
That case, so
I don't know, that just came through me. I don't know.
No, I love that you brought that up because, even if, how do I word this? Because I feel like that may potentially never go away for some moms.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that fear
Correct.
might always still kind of be there. And
Mm-hmm.
even as a stepmom, and, I feel like this is important to say, is that I've cried so much sometimes, wanting to not even necessarily like be their mom, but be seen as a woman who is appreciated with such love, because
Mm-hmm.
there is a difference.
Mm-hmm.
And we are teaching our children, that, I'm a person and that I'm deserving of love and kindness. And also, when it's given, like I teach my kids, you give what you receive. Like,
yeah.
but,
Yep.
but there's been days where I've cried and I've wished that I was their mom. And not because I don't think that they have a great one, but because there is days where I just wish I was. And I wish that there wasn't that, complication in some of the relationships sometimes, or that they didn't have to see them struggle or worry. And it's not because I wish, their mom away. Never, ever in my life would I ever do that. But as a stepmom, I think we also go through, that comparison, that worry, those back and forth games too, is that we have this relationship and sometimes we wish it was more. And I think that also comes from the fact that, myself and my husband, we have 2 children together. So they do have, another brother and sister. They have, siblings. And so it's explaining that even to like our youngest ones, and explaining this relationship and how it changes, because, when I have a stepbrother, and he used to always wonder, he's like, why does Kara have to go? Like, why does she have to leave? When is she coming back? I just want to be with her. And, this is something that's true for, and I don't want my kids to feel this either, is that, my brother felt, and I know that maybe my youngest will feel this too, is like this jealousy that they get to go, or that they're not staying, or this feeling of that they're not there all the time. And a thing with me is that, my stepbrother got to be with my father all the time. And I didn't. And that crushed me. And so I feel like, as a mom who worries and has fears, and a stepmom has fears and worries, so do children, and they don't know how to like balance all of that. And so I think the best way to like, talk about these things is to communicate. And, my relationship with their mom has done like a complete, what is that, 180? Like it is completely flipped. Because there was a point where we couldn't talk, and it wasn't because I didn't want to. There was just a lot of unresolved things that I didn't know of, that now are resolved. However, now, I can be on the phone with her. I can sit at the hockey games with her, and I actually, I've said to my husband, like, I would love to be her friend. Like, I would actually, I do like her. Like, she's a nice person. So like, and I think that's something to chat about too, but, you go ahead. I know you want to say something.
I know, for one thing, for me, this is full transparency. I don't know if I've ever shared this with anybody.
Yeah.
I think one thing for me, and it was totally 110% based on my own insecurities in the relationship, in my relationship with him, was this fear, this insecurity around the bond that he had with his ex-wife, because they did have this child together. Like, I was remembering back to when I delivered my babies and thinking, like, that was such a magical moment and such a powerful moment in our life. And there is a bond there. And I know that, again, based off of insecurities that I have or had when I was in that relationship, that was always in the back of my head. Like, I same thing. I loved her as a person. I honestly, I think she and I could have gone out well, not partying because I'm not a big old party animal, but we could have gone out,
Yes.
had a couple glasses of wine, had some dinner,
Yeah.
had a really good time together. But there was just always this fear, like, oh my God, is there something that he, like, does he wish he was still with her because they have that bond?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that's probably that's another whole issue for another whole episode, but like, I don't know if you've had that as a stepmom, but that was a thing that I carried a little bit.
Well, I'm open to talking about whatever. There has definitely been a moment in my relationship where I've wondered, I've been curious, and
Yeah.
like, let's just say it straight out, he had children with another woman. And so I know that they were very intimate and they were together and
Right.
they loved one another.
Uh-huh.
And so, yeah, there was a point when I first was in the relationship with my husband that, that didn't necessarily like occur to me. Like I knew, but I didn't process it the same way until later in our relationship when things got really much deeper.
Mm-hmm.
Not, that floofy part, but you really start getting into like the deep parts of your relationships.
It's not so fun anymore. Not every day anyway.
Yeah, we have a great relationship, but it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, no, there was definitely like where I said to him, like, I know that you at one point were really intimate with this woman. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's moments where, I question myself and, I've said to him, like, there was a point where like you loved one another and there was a child that was created and children that were created. And so that they're a constant reminder of like, the good parts that were there.
Right.
So it's like, I think, I don't even necessarily know how to talk about that situation because I feel like it's very, it's very deep and I don't, but I think it's just like, we can just say it straight out is that is definitely something that, a stepmom and a mother would think about because now, even on the separate spectrum there is that I now have 2 children with him as well. So she's very aware of the fact that we've also now created a very intimate relationship with one another.
Right.
So it's like, it's finding that balance of like removing any of that worry. And sometimes it's hard. Like, let's just be honest. It drives me nuts when people say, oh, don't call things hard. No, sometimes life is hard. Sometimes things happen and life happens and step parenting, co-parenting, motherhood is one of those things that is a constant lesson. And there are freaking hard days. Like,
it is hard. It's super hard.
Yeah. But this, honestly, I could talk forever about this topic because the both of us we're in it, but in different
and at every level, right? Like as children and as moms and moms, at every level. So it's just like we said at the beginning, it's just such a multifaceted thing too, because then it, your relationship, like me as the mom and my relationship with their dad plays a huge role in how you co-parent with the stepmom,
Yes. Well, and I think these conversations, like, I want to thank you first for having this conversation with me.
Yeah, of course.
Because I know that there are a lot of moms, stepmoms who want to have these conversations, who want to be able to have these conversations. And quickly before we wrap everything up, when things weren't always the best in my, relationship with their mom, I'm very much of a person who kind of like will sometimes fly by the seat of my pants, like in like a scene of a movie where you're like, whoa, that never happens in real life. Where like there was a lot of heated conversations and it got to the point where I was like, we can no longer be speaking to one another this way. We can no longer be living this way. Like we have to think about the children and about, life in general and about who we want to be as women, to the point where I went to her door and I sat and I knocked on her door. And I talked to her for 3 hours, just her and I, and that was a pivotal moment in our relationship because we couldn't. The two of us could not go on feeling insecure, hurting one another, saying things we didn't mean, hurting children and other things that, we just couldn't control that would happen from those choices. And so we made a decision that our relationship and going forward and moving in a positive way was more important than how it was going before. And that takes a lot of courage and that takes a lot of, takes putting your ego aside. It takes, letting go of this need to control and just seeing one another as these two individuals who really are just love these children. And so I had to add that because literally it was like a scene of a movie.
Well, and because at the end of the day, it really is, and you've touched on this multiple times throughout this conversation, it's about the kids, period. End of subject. I don't care who I've talked to. I've talked to single dads that I know too, who are all like, upset about the parenting choices the mom is making. I'm like, well, pause. That's her business. Your business is your relationship with your children. Yes. Period.
Yes.
And at some point, like you said, you have to just set your ego aside and just say, okay, wait a minute. Am I upset about this for myself or my kids? If you're upset about it for your kids, yeah, absolutely. Then Mama Bear, you go right ahead. You have the conversation. You have the 3-hour conversation. You do the thing. But if it's about you and your fears and your ego, that's got to find a new home.
Hey, freaking men. Thank you for saying that, because, that's important, because there's a lot of conversations and things that can be triggered and can come up. And it is like tuning in and actually, asking yourself that, like, is this actually about me? Or is this about my kids? How am I responding, and why am I responding this way? Yep. And so that takes a whole other level of emotional intelligence too, that can be something that you navigate. And so, if there's like whoever is listening to this at this moment, is like, give yourself the grace to move through this and know that these relationships can thrive and they can be just exactly what you want them to be. And that, if you're their biological mom, that you hold a beautiful space, and that if you are a stepmom, you also hold a beautiful space, and they're massively different, but also massively beautiful together. Yes. So,
and think about it. It reminds me of, I don't know if you watch Friends. I'm of a generation where like that, I watch it all the time. And there's a scene where, in one of the early episodes where Ross is having a baby with his ex-wife, who's a lesbian, and they're locked in this closet, and Phoebe says, she starts laughing, and they're like, what's so funny about this whole situation? And she said, this baby has so much love already. It's got 3 parents arguing over who loves it more.
Yes.
And you just have to take that perspective that like these children, and yes, it's hard for them to navigate sometimes and understand the logistics of who's coming and going, but these children have another adult in their life that gets to love them. And God forbid there's some reason I can't do something for them. I'm pretty darn excited that they've got somebody else that they know that they can go to.
Yes. 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 There is so much love to go around. Yeah. And I know that, and my husband and I, we've talked about this, that if there was ever a point where our relationship, dissolved, which I don't ever want to happen. However, I told him, like, you hold a special place in our children's like lives. And so at the end of the day, like, it's important to nurture that, and that is what it is. And that's a whole other topic too.
It is.
But see, like, we can go on so many ways with this, but yes. I feel like we have had a really beautiful conversation.
It's been wonderful
in this. And so I just want to say thank you again for, being open and honest and talking about this with me, and for being on the podcast, because
thank you for having me. So exciting.
Yes. I'm happy to have you, and I have a feeling that we'll end up having another conversation on the podcast, because this was beautiful, and there were so many things that we were like, oh, we could talk about this.
I know. My brain is going like 1,000 miles an hour right now.
So before we go, though, I would really love for you to share how people can connect with you on social media if they love this conversation and want to connect with you further. Where can they find you?
I am transitioning my business more over to Instagram. So that I would prefer, if they're going to connect with me, find me on Instagram. It's at Käri Heard. I am also on Facebook, also just at Käri Heard. But I'm trying to transition a little bit more over to Instagram and just really be really potent in one platform rather than sort of showing up in all the platforms.
Yes.
I do also have a podcast, Purpose Unleashed, so you can check that out. And actually, when we hang up here, we're going to be chatting about when you're going to be on there, and we're going to replicate this conversation. At Purpose Unleashed, I also have a journal called Purpose Unleashed available on Amazon. Just full of daily prompts that I use every single day, so they can find that there. I think that's it.
Perfect. Well, all of these links, you guys, same with the link to your journal, will all be in the show notes. So make sure you guys take a peek. And I want to thank you again for being on the podcast. And to everyone else, I will see you guys all in the next episode. Bye, everyone.